Hi, I'm Pat. All right, in this type of problem, what they want us to do is to use the given function value. So they've given us sine of theta, in this case, equals -3/5. They also mentioned to use trig identities, which we definitely will. And we're supposed to find these indicated trig functions, so they'll throw a couple of them at you, for us, cosine and tangent, in the specified quadrant. And ours is quadrant 4, okay? So a bit of information to process, but let's start making sense of it. What I'll do is I'll begin with that quadrant 4. I'd like to represent this angle theta, and then I'll label the sides of a certain triangle in order to represent that -3/5, okay? Probably even already know what I'm talking about, don't you? In terms of the fourth quadrant, I'm going to go here, but that triangle, as I'm looking at this as if it's sine, that's what? The y value over the r value? That's what I'm talking about. So I'm going to draw a quick little triangle like this, right triangle, where my y value now will be the numerator of this fraction. But I'm only hesitating for a quick second because there is a minus sign in front of it. And I want you to realize that that minus sign is going to go up with the 3. It's going to go up to the numerator. And that makes sense in my drawing because the y value is going to be a -3 since I'm down, right? And that denominator of 5, which is our r, that's the distance you are from the origin to that point, that's always positive because it is a distance. So when I have a negative sign like this in front of a fraction, don't attribute it to the r. Attribute it to either the x or the y, or sometimes both. It'll depend on the problem you're in, okay? All right, but now I've got this triangle to represent my theta. That's the angle here. And so it fits with what the information is that they gave me. Sine of theta is -3/5. That's where the triangle came from. And it's going to help me to find these two functions that they're asking me for, cosine of theta and tangent of theta, okay? So, in fact, I could probably even get cosine right now from the triangle. But I'm going to use one of those trig identities that they even specified in the directions. And specifically, the one I'd like to use here is what I'd want you to think about, is that I'm looking for cosine right now, right? That's what they want me to find. And they gave me sine. That's given information. So when it comes to those identities, can you think of one that has sine and cosine in it? And this is an important one. It's one of your go-to identities, is the Pythagorean identity. So you go here and say the sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta equals 1, right? It's a good identity to keep in your head. And it came into my head because, again, I'm looking for cosine, I know sine, so this identity has both of those in there. So let's put those specific values in that we know, in this case, -3/5. That's my sine of theta, but it's squared, so I'll use parentheses and square it, plus cosine squared of theta, which is what I'm looking for, cosine squared of theta equals 1. Now I can solve for cosine of theta. Okay, so I'll square this and get 9/25 plus cosine squared of theta equals 1. Cosine squared of theta equals 1 minus 9/25. Let's see if I can do that arithmetic on the same line here, because 1 would be 25/25, right? And then minus 9 would be 16 in the numerator, 25. And now I don't want cosine squared, I want cosine, so I'll take the square root of both sides and get plus or minus 4/5 if I square root that 16/25, right? Okay, good. That's good algebra. Pat yourself on the back. But now let's also think about a little bit of trigonometry. And all I mean by that is I can rule out the negative option here. The algebra gave me plus or minus, but the trigonometry is telling me it's the positive. What do you mean? Well, remember, we're in the fourth quadrant, and they told us that. And in the fourth quadrant, cosine is positive because your x value is positive, okay? All right, so I've got my cosine of theta equaling 4/5, part of my answer. They also asked for the tangent of theta. And what I'm going to use for that is another one of our identities. And I'll go here, and I'll realize that tangent of theta equals sine of theta divided by cosine of theta. Remember that identity, all right? So with this identity, now realize we have the given pieces of the puzzle that we need. We've got the sine of a negative 3/5 that I'll put up in the numerator. We just figured out the cosine of a positive 4/5 that I'll put in the denominator, and then I'll be good to go. So this will equal, my sine was negative 3/5 divided by, I'm looking at this fraction, so my cosine is the 4/5 that we just figured out. We would always want to simplify, so I would flip and multiply and get negative 3/4 for my tangent of theta that they asked for. Got that? Already got that. Okay? A lot of good thinking in this type of problem. Okay? Hope that helped you with your thought process, and I definitely hope you reinforce it by practicing some more on your own.